This phrase is well known among anglers. It's an unspoken rule that if you catch a dead fish that's still hooked, you should pack up and leave immediately, or something bad might happen. But why is this? What's the reasoning behind it? Legend has it that the fish was hooked by a water spirit, and if you don't leave quickly, the spirit might take you next. Today's story is quite scary. It happened last summer, towards the end of July. Our protagonist, Jack, can't remember the exact date, but it was close to the 15th, which is traditionally a time of heightened spiritual activity. Jack loves fishing, especially night fishing, and he's quite passionate about it. He often goes out with his gear after dinner. On this particular evening, around 7 or 8 p.m., Jack was getting ready to go fishing. His mother warned him, "It's the end of July, don't stay out till late at night." Jack didn't believe in such superstitions. He had been night fishing for 2 or 3 years and had never come across anything unusual. So he grabbed his gear and headed for the river, which was about a 30-minute walk. But as he got closer, he felt increasingly uneasy. This night was strange. Usually the area was buzzing with other fishermen, but tonight he hadn't seen a single person. Jack felt a little anxious and considered going back, but he thought, "I've come this far and there is no one here to compete for spots. I might as well fish on my own." So he set up his tackle and started fishing. Despite his best efforts, something was wrong. From 8 p.m. until almost midnight, he didn't catch a single fish. The surface of the lake was eerily calm and no fish would bite, no matter how many times he changed the lure. Frustrated, Jack decided to pack up and leave. Just as he was about to leave, a cold wind blew past him. This was strange, as the end of July is usually hot. The sudden chill made Jack shiver and he took it as a sign to go home. As he reeled in his line, he felt something heavy. Finally, after a long night, he had caught something, but the fish wasn't struggling at all. It was a dead fish, perfectly hooked in the mouth. This reminded him of the phrase "dead on the hook," which he had heard countless times, but had never experienced. Fear crept up on him as he remembered the old stories, but he stubbornly decided to cast his line out again. As soon as he did, the raft began to move. Excited, Jack reeled it in, only to find a dark, murky mass with long strands of hair tangled in it. The sight of the hair sent a shiver down his spine, and the cold wind blew again. Terrified, Jack dropped everything and ran back to his car. Strangely, the cold wind seemed to follow him into the car, making it as cold as a fridge. Jack turned the heating on full blast and sped home. The road was a deserted country lane lined with poplar trees, and he drove as fast as he could, but the cold kept getting worse. After about 10 minutes, Jack's hands began to shake with the cold. Out of habit, he looked in the rear view mirror and saw a dark figure sitting in the back seat. He couldn't make out any features, just a human shadow. Terrified, Jack pulled to the side of the road, too afraid to look back. He sat there, frozen in fear, in the still night. After what seemed like an eternity, he shakily reached for a cigarette to calm his nerves. As he fumbled for the lighter, he felt a pendant. It was a keepsake his father had given him when he was born, something he always wore. He put it around his neck and lit a cigarette. When he had finished, he drove on without looking back. As he drove, the pendant began to feel tight around his neck, like a rope slowly tightening. The closer he got to home, the tighter it felt, until he almost suffocated. Just when he thought he couldn't breathe, a cool sensation washed over his chest and the pressure on his neck eased. He sped home, not stopping until he reached his driveway. He rushed inside without even grabbing his fishing gear. When he got home, his mother noticed his pale face and asked if anything had happened. Jack told her the whole ordeal. His mother, angry and frightened, scolded him for not heeding her warning. She then removed the pendant from his neck, which had snapped in half. The top half was still around his neck, but the bottom half was lost somewhere. That night, Jack came down with a fever that lasted for 3 days. It was only after he had recovered that his mother heard a story from a neighbor. Near the river where Jack was fishing was a village where a woman had hanged herself after years of abuse at the hands of her husband. Her body had been buried near the river. It seemed that Jack had met her restless spirit. Those who enjoy night fishing will recall the story of Dead on the Hook. Scientifically, it's said that due to water density and other factors, a fish could be near death but still able to move slightly and thus be hooked. Alternatively, a dead fish could be hooked accidentally due to the density of the water. So there's no need to take it too seriously. Treat it as a story and enjoy your fishing. Thanks for your support, and if you enjoyed this story, please follow, comment, and share. I've always had a soft spot for antique shops. There's something about the musty smell, the way the light filters through the dusty windows, casting everything in a golden glow, that makes me feel like I've stepped back in time. Last summer, on a trip to a quaint little town with my cousin Sarah, we came across an old shop on the edge of town. The sign over the door read "Curiosities and Wonders." Inside, the shelves were overflowing with trinkets and relics from forgotten times. We spent hours browsing, and just as we were about to leave, something caught my eye. It was a small, intricately designed amulet nestled in a velvet-lined box. The amulet was made of a dark, tarnished metal with strange symbols etched around a blood-red gem. The moment I touched it, a shiver ran down my spine, but I was inexplicably drawn to it. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman with piercing blue eyes, noticed my interest. She warned me that the amulet was not for sale, insisting that it carried a dark curse, but I couldn't resist. After some haggling, she reluctantly sold it to me, muttering a warning I couldn't quite make out. At home, I proudly showed my find to Sarah and my friend Mark. They were skeptical but curious. We decided to research the symbols on the amulet in the hope of discovering its origin. That night, as I slept, I was plagued by vivid nightmares. Dark shadows twisted and danced around me, whispering in a language I couldn't understand. I woke up in a cold sweat, the amulet glowing faintly on my bedside table. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Objects in my room moved on their own, doors creaked, and I had the constant feeling of being watched. Sarah and Mark experienced similar disturbances. We were all on edge, but none of us connected the dots until Mark suggested it might be the amulet. Determined to get to the bottom of this, we plunged into research. We scoured the internet, visited libraries, and even contacted a local historian. Our findings were startling. The amulet was linked to an ancient cult that believed in summoning dark spirits. It was said that anyone who possessed the amulet would be haunted by the spirits it was supposed to control. We found an old diary entry written by a man who owned the amulet in the 1800s. His descriptions of the haunting matched our experiences perfectly. He wrote of voices in the night, shadowy figures, and a growing sense of dread that eventually drove him mad. Realizing the danger we were in, we sought the help of a paranormal expert named Dr. Evelyn Hart. She agreed to meet with us after hearing our story, intrigued and concerned. Dr. Hart examined the amulet and confirmed our fears. It was indeed cursed, and the spirits bound to it were growing stronger. She explained that in order to break the curse, we would need to perform a ritual to sever the connection between the amulet and the spirits. The ritual required certain items, including a rare herb and a sacred candle, both of which were difficult to find. After days of searching, we managed to gather everything we needed for the ritual. Dr. Hart led us through the process. We lit the sacred candle and burned the herb, chanting an ancient incantation. The air grew thick and a cold wind swept through the room as we performed the ritual. Suddenly, the shadows around us seemed to come alive, swirling angrily. The amulet glowed brighter and brighter until it was almost blinding. We continued to chant, our voices trembling with fear. With a final deafening roar, the shadows disappeared and the amulet's glow faded. The room fell silent and the oppressive feeling lifted. We had done it. The curse was broken. The relief was overwhelming. We thanked Dr. Hart profusely and promised to heed her advice to avoid cursed objects in the future. The amulet, now a lifeless piece of metal, was buried deep in the woods, far from anyone who might stumble upon it. The nightmares stopped and the strange occurrences ceased. Life slowly returned to normal, but the experience left a lasting mark on us. We had faced something beyond our understanding and survived. It was a lesson in humility and caution. From that day on, antique shops did not hold the same attraction for me. The mysteries of the past are sometimes better left undisturbed, for you never know what dark secrets they may hold. Years later, I still have moments when I wake up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding, half expecting to see a shadowy figure at the foot of my bed. But I remind myself that we have beaten the darkness before, and we can do it again if we have to. Sarah and Mark, though shaken, have also moved on with their lives. We often reminisce about that summer and our brush with the supernatural, always with a shudder and a shared look that says we were lucky. The amulet remains buried, its power dormant, but its story lives on as a cautionary tale. Some relics of the past are meant to stay buried, their mysteries unsolved, their curses intact.